Greetings today, everyone. Micah Vannon. Welcome back to my channel, and we are going to continue with Alchemy and Mysticism, and this is the chapter on the world. In particular, more about the microcosm and the macrocosm of the different worlds in terms of your own world, as well as the world outside of you, and of course, including the universe too. So in this chapter, it is the macrocosm, and it says nil sine dio, which means not without God or nothing without God. And this is, for Plato, the universe or great world order was created by God, the creator, as a manifestation and illustration of his own perfection. And so he formed it as a single visible living thing, which was to include all related creatures. By turning it, he shaped it into a sphere, giving it the most perfect form of all. And this is by Timaeus in 410 BC. So in the first puzzle picture, which if you remember from our first study here, we talked about how the reason why the mystery schools used pictures, and they call them puzzle pictures, is because they were created to include many little intricate details that would help to trigger the subconscious mind and help you remember some spiritual truths that they can hide, and that, you know, it's embedded in the pictures, but they're not written down in script form, which can be found by others that are not part of the mystery schools, and also some of their enemies in a way, because a lot of these people, these philosophers and these types of mystics, were persecuted against back in the Darker Ages. So this is why they hid a lot of their knowledge within these pictures. So this first one here is a puzzle picture called it's actually the Pretosia Margarita Novelia. And this is the expensive pearl or valuable pearl. And it's by James Lassinus. And this is a picture of a couple different things here. We have a griffin in the center here, and it looks like we have a male and a female character on the bottom, representing the sun of the male character, the masculine, and the feminine is the moon. And then you have the tree of life in the center, the elixir. So this is like the life elixir. And you have all these other types of figures here. And it says, I assure you that anyone who attempts a literal understanding of the writings of the Hermetic philosophers will lose himself in the twists and turns of a labyrinth from which he will never find the way out. So that was written by, actually, this is Livre de Artifice, and this is written in 1741, and it describes in the courtyard sulfur and mercury, the two basic components of matter. The three walls symbolize the three phases of the work, like the great work, which begins in spring under the zodiac sign of Aries, and the decaying corpse in summer in the sign of Leo. The conjunction of spirit and soul occurs, and in December, in the sign of Sagittarius, the indestructible red spirit body emerges, the elixir or the drinkable gold of eternal youth. So once again, we're getting into the idea of the fountain of youth, to find immortality or eternal youth, which was on a lot of their minds back then. The next puzzle picture here is actually known as the Golden Lion. And this shows a picture of the outer fire in the form of a cherub, guides the alchemical couple sulfur and mercury into the labyrinth of material transformation. The central temple is the place of their transformation, which can only occur with the help of the secret salt fire, which opens up the metals. This is formed by ammoniac, salt of tartar, and salt patir, which is taken isolated from the divine dew. The six-pointed star on the roof tells the wise men of the birth of their philosophical child. So in this picture, we have all the different zodiacs. That's it right here, all the different types of zodiac symbols. And we have the six-pointed star in the center here at the top. So once again, it's another symbol for the alchemy that they're trying to achieve, a transformation of taking base metals and then turning them into pure gold, which is a spiritual gold that they are more after. It's about the purification of the soul so that they can reunite with the all. So that is that puzzle picture. And here it continues on, and it says this. In the cosmology of the Gnostic Ophioites, which I looked up, and the Ophioites have an interesting set of worship. They're a sect of Gnostics that Ophioite means a serpent. So it's a sect of Gnosticism who revered or worshipped the serpent from the Garden of Eden as a symbol of wisdom, which the malevolent demiurge tried to hide from Adam and Eve. So many of you may know them as Luciferians, or the modern kind of name of them today. That is a group of people that believed that Satan actually represented wisdom. And so that is where that sect of Gnosticism comes from. So we can rightfully say that Luciferians, that type of branch of ideology, actually comes from this type of sect of Gnostics, the Ophioites. The sea monster, the Leviathan, Ouroboros, as the celestial primordial water, forms the outermost circle of the world of creation, which is inaccessible to the experience of the senses, and shuts it off from the divine world of love and light. The Kabbalah, which is strongly indebted to Gnostic teachings, also places a veil between God and creation. Jacob Boehm called this celestial veil the upper water. And in Blake's mythology, man has dwelt in the sea of time and space since the flood. Now, if you are familiar with the Silmarillion, Tolkien also uses some of these ideas. So it is not a surprise that Tolkien, being fully knowledgeable in language as a language professor, and also he probably had some knowledge about philosophy and even some of these ancient spiritual ideas, because in the Silmarillion he talks about a certain place of waters, which is the upper water or the lower waters of Ulmo, and these are suggested to be different layers of the watery realm of Ulmo, and not just to suggest the ocean has depths, but also a particular place of spiritual kind of a void where only Ulmo can go, and that's where he goes to be away from the other Valar. And so it kind of separates him a little bit by having that veil in between Valinor and the water that he reside in. So in the Silmarillion has a similar idea about the different layers of water. So you have the upper water, and in Blake's mythology, man has dwelt in the sea of time and space since the flood. In the Gnostic view, earthly existence is a sphere of grim exile, And for Paracelsus, it is even the place to which Lucifer was banished, hell itself. So this might come of a surprise to you, and it might not at all. But the Gnostics actually believed that the earth existence, the earthly realm, and you might have heard this before, and this is where this idea comes from, that earth is actually hell, and that we are somehow trapped on earth in hell, and we are trying to find our way out of it into either a purgatory state or into heaven and oneness with the divine. So this idea that it's a grim exile is something that the Gnostics have believed, and that Lucifer actually resides on hell and is kind of the master of earth, and kind of helps to tempt mankind further, or is basically the ruler. So that's what the Gnostics believed in terms of what did earth represent. At birth, the light soul descends the ladder of the 7 spheres to earth. In the process, coalesced by the planets, which are seen as humble creator gods and demons, archons or archeons, encoded in dirty layers of matter. Each planet impresses a negative property upon the soul as it passes, dulling it in the process. Venus, immodesty; Mercury, miserableness; Mars, wrath; and Jupiter, vanity, etc. And after death, the earthly body remains behind as a shell in Tartarus, and the soul rises through the region of air, Behemoth, and back up to the Archonids, although these attempts to obstruct the soul's passage. Hence, precise knowledge, meaning the gnosis, of the passwords and signs is required to open the way to 7-fold purification. So this is very interesting for me to read, because if you know anything about ancient Egypt and the Book of the Dead, if you have studied that, you will learn that the priestcraft basically of the Egyptians made certain types of scrolls of magic. And if you had enough money, if you could afford these scrolls of magic that would give you the magical words and spells, then you can pass the demons that would challenge you in the afterlife, and then you could enter into the fields of gold, and then that's when you can be in actually heaven. So there's no doubt in my mind that that's where we see this crossover from ancient Egyptian mythology, Rosicrucians, and the Gnostics. And you will see that if you do a lot of research into today's Masonic lodges and other types of places of secret orders, you will find a lot of ancient Egyptian mythology and how it is sacred to them. And it's because the Greek philosophers actually mingled with the Egyptian priests. And we know that Egypt and Greece at one point in time basically shared a civilization. We have Cleopatra and Caesar and all of that. And so we know that there is that connection there. And so this is very, very similar to the idea of what's in the Egyptian Book of the Dead. So I'll keep going. So I guess you need a password, and that's why you need the gnosis. You need the knowledge that is passed down, that is through the mystery schools of the Gnostics. Okay, I'm going to keep going. The passage through the final sphere is the most difficult. According to Ophiatic doctrine, the Ophioites, this sphere's master is Saturn, the demiurge, the accursed god who created time and space. He is the serpent guarding paradise. So I just want to put it out here that I have taken the idea of like the 7 layers of heaven, or the 7 it says the 7 different planets that you have to go through. That to me represents the 7 chakras. And that has always correlated to the different points of consciousness that we go through in terms of our phases of life. You know, you have your root chakra. Okay, so you have to establish your roots first. You have to have those essential needs to feel like you belong on earth, and then you can start your pilgrimage or your journey back to the all. So you go from your root chakra and you move all the way up, all the way through life lessons and learning and purification in those areas, all the way back up to the crown chakra, where you can then rejoin with the all, and that is the divine union with the crown chakra, and it is the unconditional love center, you know, divine cosmic love. So for me, the 7 layers are always connected to the chakras, or symbolized by consciousness and what we go through in life. But the Gnostics equated it to different planets and the different 7 spheres. So the reconstruction of the Gnostic cosmology of the Ophites from the serpent. So then you can see here, there's different layers. So you have the behemoth, which is the sky. And then you have, I'll read it here, it just goes up from Mars, Venus, Mercury, Jupiter, Saturn, and it has all of these all the way up, and then you go into the different realms. So this is by Stuttgart, if you want to look it up, and you can start to see the reconstruction of the Gnostic cosmology. And then we have the next page here this is more of the world, the writing of the Neoplatonist Pseudo-Dionysius on the celestial hierarchies exerted a considerable influence on the structuring of the Christian cosmos through to the Renaissance. He distinguished between 9 choirs of angels, each triad being assigned to a part of the Trinity, the group of angels, archangels, and the virtues to the Holy Ghost, the powers, forces, and dominions of the Son to the Son, the thrones and cherubim and seraphim to the Father. So now you start to see that they're also equating the different hierarchies of the angels. And I will read that here. So it goes, seraphim is at the top, cherubim is the next. Then you have the thrones, the denominations of angels, the principalities, the postiates, the virtues, the archangels, the regular angels, and then you have the it's the crystalline, it says, but I think there's another word for it. I can't quite read it. It's a little bit smushed here in terms of the typo or the lettering, but this is, I looked it up before, it meant the sky layer. So they're saying that beyond the layer of the sky, then you have the different hierarchies of angels. And I'll keep going. So in Dante's Divine Comedy, which if any of you have read this poem, you'll get a lot of the Gnostic teachings there, also peppered with some Catholicism as well. The soul on its pilgrimage rises from the realm of hell, which projects spherically into the earth, via the mountain of purgatory and the 9 spheres of the planets, the fixed stars and the crystalline sphere, all of which are kept in motion by angels, up to paradise, where it finds its home in the white rose of heaven, illuminated by the divine light. Well, that's beautiful. So this is by Michelangelo Catani, and this is La Materia della Divina Commedia di Dante Alighieri. So this is the Divine Comedy, and he's just writing more about that. And this is a very interesting picture here of the different layers, the different spheres. So you have the hemisphere of Earth, and hell is on the bottom here, but hemisphere of Earth is pretty close to it. Jerusalem is below in the middle layer here, purgatory. It says the dark wood, interesting. Air, And then you go to fire and the sphere of the moon, the sphere of Mercury, the sphere of Venus, the sphere of the sun, the sphere of Mars, the sphere of Jupiter, the sphere of Saturn, space and time, and the sphere of the fixed stars of the zodiacs, and the crystalline sphere, the premium mobile, and the Imperium paradise. So there's many different layers that you have to go through to the Gnostics to get to the supreme paradise. I'll keep going here. The enthroned Christ Pantocrator, which I looked up, and that meant that's the all-heavenly All-Father, blesses the universe below him. The spheres of Jupiter and Saturn are inhabited by hierarchies of angels. At the center is the map of the world with the T-shaped division into the 3 continents of Asia, Europe, and Africa, a division familiar since classical antiquity, which depicted Asia as the same size as Europe and Africa put together. The vertical of the T is the Mediterranean, and the horizontal is formed by the Don, the Black Sea, and the Nile. So then you have this here, and this is the figure of Christ sitting at the top. And so Christ is over all, Christ consciousness, and then you have the different zodiacs that are rotating together through the different spheres. You have the different types of planetary influences and the constellations. And I wish that I could read this in Latin to see what this here is about, but you can always Google these images if you look online and you want to look a little bit more at the Gnostic teachings. This is the manuscript of Lambert of Saint Omer in 1260 in Paris. Generally, we're getting an idea that people, even long time ago, were still searching for questions to existence. And they were doing it by creating these types of imagery to help them understand the different levels and layers, I think personally, of going through different events in their lifetimes. I mean, if you look at it, each one of these people that have made these puzzle pictures have gone through a life where they have experienced both joy, both sadness and suffering. And they have also experienced certain losses and gains. And this is all about how to understand it, how to understand all the different levels of existence that we go through. Here it says, the souls ascend from the realm of the elements via the spheres of the planets, the 4 levels of the soul, and the 9 choirs of angels to the highest sphere of Platonic ideals. Christ sits enthroned above them all. They're also trying to explain zodiac signs because many of us are into astrology, but sometimes we don't understand how it works. What the Gnostics were starting to understand is that there was a celestial mobile that is basically set into motion, where it will move around the earth, and where you are born, the geography of the latitude and the longitude and the time that you are born in, those rays of energy and consciousness that those planets actually symbolize and are created through the essence that each of them carry, that determines then your kind of personality and your life and basically makes up who you are. So the zodiac signs to them were like a map of the soul to understand this celestial mobile, where how souls would enter and reincarnate onto Earth, depending where their planetary alignments were at the time of their birth. So Christ is above all, but yet zodiac signs are all below. So there's a hierarchy. And then this is what this says here. On the nature of things, the diagram shows the possible relationships and transformations of the 4 elements, both between each other and with respect to the 4 seasons and the temperaments. So you might have heard about the 4 temperaments, especially in the medieval times. They really talked about this a lot. The melancholic, the caloric, the sanguine, and the phlegmatic. And so these different types of 4 personalities were also used to describe the different seasons. It says earth and autumn are melancholic, and fire and summer is caloric, and air and spring is sanguine, and water and winter is phlegmatic. And you can look a little bit more up about the 4 temperaments, but generally the melancholic is slow, slow moving, sometimes more readily to be depressed, more of a stable kind of type of personality. And they generally see that you're melancholy. You know, that's where that word comes from. The caloric are known as being more extroverted, more full of energy, the summer, the fire type of energy, you know, more those that are optimists, and they are more out there as extroverts and have more of a quicker energy to them, like fire. And then air, spring, sanguine is more of the kind of the gentle, the more peaceful type of outgoing personality, but at the same time more quiet, shy, reserved. And then the phlegmatics are usually the ones that are more introverted, intellectuals, self-reflective, not necessarily shy, but just not as outgoing as other personalities. So that's how they kind of divide the different temperaments, and they also attribute them to the different seasons. The year as a network of relationships between the seasons, the elements, and the 4 points of the compass. So this is of the nature of things. So they're trying to understand, why are there so many different personalities in our world? And, you know, does the planetary influences bring about the collective with all these different personalities to color our world and make a variety? The World here by Robert Flood. So Flood combined the diagrams of the Middle Ages as handed down by the well-known encyclopedic works of Isidore of Seville, AD 560 through 633, with the complex symbolism of the Kabbalah. So the top, the components of the microcosm. So I'm going to show you on here because it's going to be hard to see, and I wanted you to see this part. So let me share my screen. So let's see, this one I believe is, if this one's in the middle, yes. So this one is the components of the macrocosm. So this is what makes the outer world. And as you can see, if I go here just to the big screen here, you can see in the center, you have what makes the outer world is the physical bodies, the animals, the vegetables, and the minerals they put in the center. And then you have the different layers. I looked up some of these Latin words, and you can actually look up Robert Flood, and you could look this up. It's called the Utistici Cosmi, which is the and I can write it down, but you could just look up Robert Flood and you will actually see this. It's pretty much something that you could find easily if you look up the macrocosm and the microcosm of the components. But this has different layers that they're saying that kind of create the outside world. So you have let's see, it says right here, one second. Let's see, if this is the one right here that you could see where it has the different types of layers. You have, I wrote this down before and now I can't find it. Oh, yes. Okay, so this is not about the personalities. This has all the different types of planets and different elements that are attributed to the different planets. Um, so you have the water element, you have the fire element, you have, and this is where it says on the third here, on the third level, ether element, Eris, and then the element ignis. Ignis is a word for fire in Latin, and element aqua, which is water. And then you have the element tenebra or terra, that's also earth there. So it's showing the different types of elements. And then when you go to the microcosm of the human, and I will get to that here. Let me stop the screen on this one and then show you this one. This one is the microcosm. So now they're starting to see all the planets, all the elements, and everything else makes the individual. And there it is. So now you have the Homo sapien, or the human, in the center of everything. And then if you can see very small letters here, it has the second, it's the second layer. You'll see melancholia, caloria, and sanguine, and the phlegmatic. So you have the different personalities as well. And then it goes up into the different fire elements. You got ignis element here, and then we go to the aqua element. But you have the horizon, microcosm, and you have all these different types of layers that create the human. The anima vitalis, which is like the invigorating spirit. And so they're trying to understand more about what's the difference between the macrocosm and the microcosm, but also showing that they combine the same elements, meaning that in the greater world and in the universe, there's the elements of whatever makes our world as far as on the periodic table, as well as the 4 elements that we see in nature. And then we also see those elements within our own bodies. We have the elements because we are made from the stardust, we are made from the earth, and we have those elements in our body. So they're investigating that higher connection, as above, so below, that the human body seems to compromise all the exact same elements that we find in the universe. And that is something that was a kind of a major discovery. And I think that that's what led to a great awakening in the idea of understanding this interconnection, this non-locality of humans and the universe in terms of how connected we are to everything. So I'll stop sharing there. So you can look that up, Robert Flood, that is his name, and that is the macrocosm and the microcosm. And it's really fun. If you have an app that you can change the Latin words to the English words, that might really help you out a lot. And you can then have a great time researching and investigating all the different layers and understand how the elements correspond to the human and how connected we are to the universe, how the universe and the human are basically one. The world. So the next one here is based on the work of the Florentine Pico della Mirandola, 1463 to 1494, the systems of the so-called Christ or Christian Kabbalah linked to Neoplatonic and Christian elements with a knowledge of Jewish mysticism that was often taken from corrupt sources. In this diagram, Robert Flood established a parallel between the levels of the Ptolemaic cosmos and the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet from which God created the world. So then you see this picture here, and it has devs, and devs is another word for God, or divine. And there are, once again, same hierarchy of angels. Seraphim is at the very top. And then you have the cherubim. Then you have the dominations, the throne, as I read before. And then it includes the different planets all the way down to the different elements. So you have, after the crystalline sky, then you have the Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, Sol, which I believe is sun, Venus, Mercury, Luna, moon, Ignis, fire, air, water, and then earth. And so they're showing a spiral. If you could see, that's the spiral here. And that is the spiral of creation. And so they're mapping out basically our Milky Way and also how galaxies move. So they're showing that it's the spiral of life and trying to get back through those layers all the way up to reach your divine godhood, going through all these different levels of planets as well as the hierarchies of angels. And you can read about the different types of angels. The seraphims are really interesting because they're angels with multiple wings, said to have multiple wings. The cherubims are little childlike angels, and the denominations are, I think, larger type of angels. Thrones are really an interesting angel to read. They're almost like giant chairs, basically. And they have lots of eyes. That's what I have read about. So there's a lot of different types of angels that you can look at and learn about the different hierarchies of angels. The world. On this section here, the geocentric concept of the world was still evident in 18th century Freemasonry. The magical outline of the world after Ptolemy from Georg von Welling's Opus Magnum Kabbalisticum is divided into 5 regions. A and B are the primal elements, fire and water. So A and B are fire and water, as you can see. And then it says C is the region of the stars. Oh, and it's mapped out with stars. And D, the region of the air, where the 2 elements merge into Shemaim, the fiery water of the spirit, which as the seed of all things reaches the surface of the earth in the dew. F, virgin earth. So earth is this level here. And G is the subterranean air and the red focal point of the central fire. So then you get to the core of the earth. And I think what they're doing here is by saying, the fiery water of the spirit, the seed of all things, they're showing there's different levels and layers to the human being as well. That as you see the surface, that's a mask. That's our ego that we wear. But as you get deeper, deeper, deeper into the soul, into the heart of a person, you get to the fiery center of their soul. And that is where their spirit resides. And that is where the truth of them resides, because on the surface, you get just the mask, you get the ego that is really just reflecting kind of an emotional response. But beyond the emotional response is the true spirit that is, untainted, uncorrupted by pain and suffering, but is fiery, eternal fire that cannot be put out. But it takes some time to get through those different layers. So like the earth has layers, the human soul has layers, or the human itself as an entity has layers. And eventually you get to the fiery spirit inside. And one thing I want to say about that is we always recognize, and we can see this in J.R.R. Tolkien's stories, we always recognize when the truth of this fiery spirit comes forwards. We recognize it within each other. So we can go through our lives and we can live on the surface, just kind of showing what we want to show. And it's our mask to protect ourselves, as well as as a reflection of what we have gone through. But there are moments and times where we show our pure spirit. And what's beautiful about the Lord of the Rings stories, and why I use it as a connection and as a vehicle of spiritual development, is because you see the pure spirit. Tolkien was very good at doing that, showing the pure spirit of the hobbits, showing the pure spirit of the elves, showing the pure spirit of Gandalf, showing the pure spirit of Aragorn, showing the pure fiery spirit, and showing the pure fiery spirit of Sauron, which is always also not always so great, because it depends on what it comprises of. But there's something really special about being able to see the truth beyond the ego and the mask, and we recognize that within each other, and that's when we can recognize each other's divine light, because that's the fiery spirit within. So I get what they're saying about the different layers. When we go into the next page here, this is a lot. So this is quite an interesting set of diagrams. So this is the comparative depiction of cosmological systems. The Ptolemaic system, AD 100 through 160, with the Earth at the center, surrounded by the 7 ethereal spheres of the moon, Mercury, Venus, the Sun, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn, which all move in a circle around the Earth. Above them is the static level of the fixed stars and the circles of the Zodiac. This system, which contained the whole of the age's astronomical knowledge, continued to predominate for more than a millennium, until overturned by the Copernican revolution. For Plato, 427 through 34 or 347 BC, the cosmos was the image of the cosmic soul, rotating on its own axis. He placed the sun directly above the moon, and in the so this was the first system. So they're showing the different systems. The cosmos was the image of the cosmic soul. And so you get the zodiacs and you get everything aligned. And the moon came first, and after, it's basically the next layer after the Earth. And in the pseudo-Egyptian system adopted by Vitruvius, Mercury and Venus revolve around the sun, which in turn, like the other planets, revolves around the Earth. So then they're basically trying out different systems. They're trying to understand, well, does the planets revolve around the Earth? Does the sun revolve around Earth? What is going on? So they're mapping out the different systems. And only when Copernicus discovered, this is where everything started to change. But this is where we have the system put forward by Tycho Brahe in 1580 emanates from 2 centers. The sun revolves around the Earth, the static center, and is at the same time at the center of the 5 other planets. When the sun comes along, all the planets go around with it. And then 1800 years after the Exalidarian astronomer Aristarchus Copernicus put the sun back at the center of the world in 1543, and his cosmological system corresponded to the Hermetic vision of the upward movement of matter from the outermost coarse state of Saturn, led to the highest level of sublimation, or sun gold. But much more far-reaching were the concepts of the Neoplatonian thinker, Cardinal Nicholas of Cusa, known as Cusanus. As early as 1445, he reached the conclusion that the Earth, rotating on its own axis, circled the sun, and that the universe, which Copernicus still saw as bounded by a belt of fixed stars, must be infinite. His student in spirit, Giordano Bruno, who combined the discoveries of Cosinus with speculations on magic, wrote in 1591 of the infinity of the worlds, "We are no more the center than any other point in the universe, and all things are in the universe, and the universe in all things." That's very mystical. I like that. So that is basically what you're seeing, is the different diagrams that are showing where the Earth is in terms of either the center of the orbit or going around the sun, and Copernicus discovered that the sun is the center and that we have an orbit around the sun. And that is the different ways that I guess it was discovered, that went through all of these years and these ages of trying to figure it out. And that's because they just didn't have a way of actually understanding the universe or seeing it, because they didn't have that technology. Now, the next page here is the planispheric depiction of the Platonic system. The eye of man, who stands on the earth, organizes the structure of the entire universe in the sequence that he perceives, and in a sense places himself at the center of the whole of space. Wherever he sends the ray of his gaze, he marvels at the work of the heavens, curved with admirable roundness, and believes that the globe is set at the center of this great work. Andreas Celerius. The illustration shows the Aristotelian stratification of the four elements in the sublunary region. The globe of the earth consists of the heaviest and most impure elements of earth and water. Then comes air, and finally, adjacent to the sphere of the moon, is the lightest and purest element, fire. So then he basically created like a hierarchy of the elements. And so that was what he did. What he said there is very interesting. This is exactly what we are thinking in the New Age, isn't it? The idea that the eye of man who stands on the earth organizes the structure of the entire universe in the sequence that he perceives. So the way that we perceive the world, the way that we perceive the universe, is exactly how we will experience it. Why? Because we are at the center in our mind of our own universe. And so the universe inside of our mind that we perceive is the one that we have decided to look at, to gaze at. And this is an idea that we are thinking right now, that thoughts create the reality and create the reality that we perceive and we experience. So this thought has been around since 1660. Spatial depiction of the Platonic system. Most ancient philosophers believed that the superlunary world, i.e. the ethereal heavens, consisted of several circles of spheres, solid and diamond hard, the larger of which contained the smaller, and that the stars, like nails set in the wall of a ship or some other movable object, were set in motion by them. The outermost opaque sphere of the fixed stars were known as primum mobile, the first moved, because driven by divine love, it caused the motion of all other spheres. And then that is a picture that I shared on my page and my Instagram for some of you who follow me there. And that I thought was a really beautiful way of explaining it. This is called the Harmonia Macrocosmica in Amsterdam, 1660, by Celerius, again, Celerius or Celerius. So this is his depiction of the different layers. And you have the zodiac sign, if some of you studied it when I shared it. So you have all the different zodiacs, and then you have the different levels of elements, and all of that makes your world. It makes, I guess, your experience. But the spheres are moved by divine love, and the divine love is depicted by the angels that are kind of pushing the wheels to turn of the universe so that everything is set in motion, but it comes from the intention, from love. So I thought that that was really neat how he shows that. Here, Kircher is receiving instruction from the angel Cosmiel, who is guiding him on an extended dream journey through the competing astronomical systems. He favored the cosmology of Brahe since he wanted to do justice to the fundamental experience of geocentricity, while at the same time wanting to give an appropriate status to the sun, which in the Hermetic view represents the divine in the cosmos. So now we have the sun at the center. And I don't know if you could see that, but there is a symbol for female and the male. And so we have the different types of symbols here. Also, the zodiacs are also represented. And this is Cosmiel, the angel that was supposedly, I guess, who showed him this view of the universe. And you have a Jewish symbol here, which I believe is probably the name for, it might be Yihad, it might be the word for God in Hebrew. So that is called iter exactium, which means the ecstatic journey. Iter exactium, it's probably iter exactium by A. Kircher, and this was done in 1671. The ecstatic journey. And this is from the contradictory systems of Ptolemy and Copernicus. Tycho Brahe created a synthesis in which he attempted to give greater credence to the geocentric structure of the world. He arranged the position of all the other orbits as follows. Around the Earth, the center of the entire universe, rotates the moon, which, like the sun, runs a course concentric to the Earth. This, in turn, is the center of the 5 other planets, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn, which are concentric to the sun, but eccentric to the Earth. Venus and Mercury are the sole and constant satellites of the sun on its orbit around Earth. And so then you have this picture here that depicts, once again, the zodiacs, as well as the different orbital pathways of the different planets that are represented there. And there's some interesting things that you see. This is some nobles and some children, and then you have the cherubims. These are like the children-looking angels that are holding up. Basically, the universe, I guess that's the divine love that's helping the universe move. That the Earth cannot be regular in shape is already apparent in the different beginnings of day and night, and neither can it be hollow, because if it were, the sun would rise earlier in the west than in the east. As a rectangular shape is also impossible, only the spherical shape is conceivable. Elementa Astronomica, Basel, 1655. So now we know flat earthers are usually not those who understand the Gnostic teachings or have studied this kind of ancient astronomy in depth, because they absolutely talk about the spherical Earth. Now I'm starting to think, are the flat earthers those that are almost they have been enemies of the Gnostics for a long time, in terms of, those two have been fighting over who has, I guess, more of the divine truth, right? The Gnostics and the church. So flat earthers tend to sometimes be those that come from the churches and have more of a strict religious view, traditional view, coming from the Bible, because the Bible suggests that the earth is flat. Flat earth theory stems from that. But the spherical idea actually comes from the philosophers. It comes from the Gnostics, and it comes from the heretics. It comes from the heretics. It comes from the ones that were against the church and were trying to show, well, it can't be flat. It has to be spherical because of the orbits and the way that things move in space. So just so you know, that's where the flat earth theory comes from. Okay, behind the Latinized name, Sacrobosco, stands the English cleric John of Holywood, whose astronomical textbook, Spheria Munda, or Mundi, published in 1220, was one of the most widely read books of its day. And in it, he explains the Platonic view of the world, and along with numerous proofs for the spherical shape for the Earth. He provides proof of the circular orbits of the planets and explanations for solar and lunar eclipses. So now he's trying to understand, well, why does the sun and how does the moon, like how do we have these solar and lunar eclipses that happen? So then that is mapped out here. And this is showing the sphere of the world. And you have even an eye here showing how you perceive the sphere and the different hemispheres, that when you have the people on the north hemisphere, the people on the southern hemisphere will almost be like upside down if you had to perceive it, straight way and like objectively, then it the bottom half is on the other side. So that's what they're trying to map out here. I remember seeing an atlas looking at a world whose hoops and rings had been broken by Copernicus, where Tycho Brahe placed his back beneath the globe, and a shouting Ptolemy tried to support the round lump to stop it from falling into the void. In the meantime, Copernicus was breaking many crystal spheres that were placed around the globe and was stamping out the little lights that flickered in the crystal jars. So this is Hieroglyphica, Amsterdam, 1745 or 44. And there's Atlas holding up the sphere of the earth, a cherubim, couple cherubims actually, and you have the symbol for Freemasonry right there. And you have sometimes the earth will spin into the abyss and sometimes stand at the center, and sometimes it spreads flat into broad space, by William Blake, Jerusalem, 1804. I have no idea what that means. Let me think. Sometimes the earth will spin into the abyss and sometimes stand at the center, and sometimes it spreads flat into broad space. That could be a very spiritual idea. The idea that sometimes the earth will, it seems like it disappears into an abyss of space, and sometimes it seems to be the center of the universe in terms of how people view it on Earth. And then sometimes it spreads flat into broad space. That's the energetic field of space, if you want to think about it that way. And also he might be relating to the way that it's described in the Bible as a flat Earth. Very interesting. And that is the end of the world. Not really, but that's the end of this chapter. And then the next one will be the sun. So we'll learn more about the sun there. I hope you did enjoy that and learned a little bit more about some of the secret society ideas, and also drew some connections to flat Earth and round Earth, and kind of can now do your own research and look at these puzzle pictures. I did want to say that I'm going to be taking a spiritual sabbatical. I've been wanting to do this for a while, 40 days and 40 nights. If many of you have, understood a lot of different types of people, mystics, messengers, just anybody that is a spiritual seeker, at times they will take 40 days and 40 nights and try to receive some deeper messages and trying to, just clear the mind, I guess. And I have been feeling it inside of me for a while to take this break. And now that I am in quarantine and I'm not working, I thought that this would be a really wonderful time to do this before the fall. And so I'm going to take my time of being in nature and gathering some more information, and just staying away from social media at this point so that I can just really clear my mind and gather more wisdom to bring to my channel for people, to have for years to come. So I thought that it was important to let you all know. I will be back after August 17th, though. So I'm happy that you all joined me. It was so nice to see you. And I hope that this was interesting. Once again, you can find this book on Amazon. It's not the same because it's a collector's version, but this is by the Hermetic Library Alexander Rube. And I will put that in the description for some of you so that you can follow along in the book study with me. And I hope you all have a magical, wonderful, peaceful, beautiful next few weeks. And I will see you in 40 days and 40 nights. So I'll see you soon. Namaste.